Hey there, welcome to Pickled Parables. This podcast is presented by Parable Ministries as a Bible teaching resource. Thank you for joining us. Pickled Parables is a podcast about taking in and living out the Bible. Here we will study, contemplate, and testify to the Bible's incredible teachings and how it leads us to live better lives. To stay up to date with all things Parable, follow us on Instagram at parable_ministries and visit our website at parableministries.com. We hope today's message finds you well.
Well, hello, listeners. It's good to be with you all. My name is Jesse. I'm the founder of Parable Ministries. I used to teach quite a bit on this podcast when it first started, but as our ministry grew, my responsibilities grew with it, and I've been serving a more administrative role for the last couple of years. Today, I get the opportunity to share with you the story of my personal salvation, how the Lord rescued me from my sin, my fear, and even from myself. The Lord has been very good to me, even when circumstances and other events have not been. And there is little more that I could say than I give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His faithful love endures forever. I thank the Lord for my parents, who have demonstrated the gospel to me from an early age, before I even knew what it was. It took me a while to really understand it, and to accept it as the good news that it truly is. I was about 12 when I turned to the Lord, and I remember having little interest in the Bible up to that point, thinking that my family's faith was good enough for my lack of relationship with God. So when I was about 10, my family moved into a new house, and at that time I began to have very stressful nightmares. I think we can all say we've had nightmares of varying severity, but I have my reasons to believe that this was not just my imagination running wild, but that this was demonic activity oppressing me and leaving me in a complete state of fear. It lasted for about 2 years. It's rather embarrassing to admit, but I did have to spend most of that time sleeping in my parents' room because I was too terrified to sleep anywhere else. I would sometimes have difficulty even after waking up from a dream because the things I saw in the dream would follow me out, and they were as real to me as my parents who were right beside me. I didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding to really know what was going on, and so I had a really hard time explaining why I was so scared. The component of being almost paralyzed with dread was something I couldn't escape from. I also had a pretty severe speech impediment that made speaking difficult, and so that didn't help in me trying to communicate why I was getting really scared from these nightmares. One of my big concerns was that I didn't want people to think I was crazy for seeing things that weren't really there. I knew they weren't really there, but there was always an immense dread that would overwhelm me whenever I would see them. So I felt trapped. I was terrified to go to sleep. I was scared of my own shadow, and I was always tired from my lack of sleep. From the influence of my parents, I think I've always had the presumption that God existed. And I remember distinctly an evening where I cried out to God asking for relief. I tried making a deal with Him where if He took away my nightmares for just one night, then I would do whatever He wanted. That night in particular was the worst night I ever had. And I came to the conclusion that if God did exist, He clearly doesn't care about me. After 2 years of this, when I was 12, my older brother Matt began to notice in me an abject mindset of reservation. My fear had traumatized me to the point of becoming numb, emotionally, socially, and even at times physically numb. My brother became concerned for me. Something that he had noticed was my complete rejection of the gospel message. I had no problem with other people worshiping God, and going to church was fine with me because that was a social outlet for me. But when it came to God and my personal feelings toward Him, I had cut myself off from him. So one evening, my brother took me to his room. He sat me down on his bed, and he asked me if I knew what the gospel was. Of course, I knew what the gospel was. I had gone to church my whole childhood. But he wasn't satisfied with how I talked about it. And my brother Matt discerned, undoubtedly with the help of the Holy Spirit, that I had not yet received the good news of Christ. So my brother took me to the book of Galatians, and he walked me through the unearned, the no-strings-attached wonder of the gospel. Something that I had never considered. I had always viewed it as a transaction. I was flabbergasted. I didn't realize that God had already done the work, and all I had to do was receive his salvation. I left my brother, and I went upstairs to get ready for my bed. And while I was brushing my teeth, I reached a point of, what do I have to lose? I can barely live my own life now with my fear. What do I have to lose living for Christ? And so with toothpaste all over my mouth, I confessed Jesus as my Lord. I asked him to forgive me, and I promised that I would live the rest of my life for him. And I felt for the first time in years a happiness. It was a long road, but I began to recognize emotions that I hadn't felt in a long time. And that night I went to bed with hope. Now, I did have nightmares that night, but I remember them not frightening me like they used to. That whole component of dread was gone. When I was asked about it, I said it was like there was a shield that kept them from getting to me. I continued to have nightmares for a few months up to a year after my salvation, but they never impacted me like they had before. And eventually they stopped. I don't really have dreams at all now. The Lord saved me, not just from my sins, which were numerous, but from my fear and oppression. I have resolved to live the rest of my life honoring the Lord and serving him by using the gifts he has given me. Unfortunately, I became sidetracked from that resolution during my high school years. I'm the youngest of 5 boys, and I had an inferiority complex. I wanted to prove myself, my worth, to my family and to myself. So I picked our most accomplished brother. His name is David. He's the biggest, tallest, toughest brother of us all, and I thought if I followed in his footsteps, that would be the best way I could prove myself. David was a U.S. Marine, and so I went to the Marines recruitment office in town, took some tests, and was preparing to enter basic training after I graduated from high school. However, near the end of my time in high school, I got food poisoning from a restaurant, and I lost the ability to walk for a bit. I got really sick. When I was taken to the hospital, they misdiagnosed my symptoms for meningitis, and so they performed a spinal tap, which then became infected. But it took a couple years for us to figure out that it was infected. I became confined to my bed for about 1.5 years, while the infection took away the muscle and the stamina that I had built up for the Marine Corps. By the time we had figured out what was wrong, it took about another year to fix it, since the infection was inside of my spine. Once I was able to start physical therapy to walk again, it was pretty clear that the infection had damaged my spine and that I was not able to meet the Marine Corps' standard of entry. This was a time of gentle redirection for me. I became lonely lying in bed all day, and so I invited some friends over to keep me company, and our conversations turned into biblical and theological questions that we were all curious about. I offered to research those questions for the group since I had a lot of extra time, and then I would present what I found when we met up again. Please keep in mind that I wasn't teaching at this time. I would simply present my findings, all the different viewpoints on the matter, and then we would discuss it as a group. We started this format, and soon more people started to come. We had a little wooden box that people could put questions into, and I would take one for the week, research it, and then when we met up again the next week, I would share what I found. More and more people started to come because people heard that they could go to Jesse's house, or like my parents' living room, ask whatever they wanted, and they might get an answer the next week. This became a Bible study that lasted for 5 years, and it grew between 30 to 40 people. Eventually, I grew a desire to teach properly, and I got the chance to take 2 years of a Bible teaching course called ELS, which is an acronym that stands for Equipping Leaders for a Lifetime of Service. It's a nonprofit that one of my pastors started in order to help teach African pastors how to efficiently study the Bible and present their findings. I was able to take the things I learned from this nonprofit directly to the Bible study that I led, and it was wonderful. Finally, my desire to continue growing in biblical studies completely outweighed my original desire to join the Marine Corps. I developed a love for the Bible and sharing the things I found in it with other people. After a bit, I left the Bible study in 2019, and I went to a Bible college in the U.S. state of Wyoming, and I stayed there for about a year. I was hoping to finish out there, but I found some unfortunate practices that I didn't like. I didn't like how they treated certain demographics of the student body, so I took my leave after a year. In the year of 2020, I started receiving requests from people to start a Bible study type podcast, sort of like a Bible study 2.0 from what we had originally. And I'll be honest, at first, I thought this was a silly idea because podcasts are kind of the modern equivalent of, hey, let's start a band. But it was a consistent request. And so I decided to pray about it, to look into it, just to see what it would take to start a podcast. By the end of 2020, I became convinced that this was the best way that I could honor the Lord and use the giftings that He's given me. So I launched our first podcast, Pickled Parables, in January of 2021 under the organization name of Parable Ministries, because at that time I felt that the Lord was telling me to leave room for growth. And grow is what we did. Since then, we have partnered with 20 different Bible teachers who all teach on a rotating basis. We have released a second podcast called My Dusty Bible, which is a Bible reading podcast read in the New Living Translation. We are preparing 2 other podcasts that are set to release this summer and by the summer of 2025. We have reached thousands of people in over 40 different countries. And just last year, we officially became a 501c3 nonprofit. We found this to be a great resource for young adults in particular who leave their church family to go to college far away or who just get disconnected by moving. Everything we offer is totally free due to the generosity of our supporters, and it's easily accessible for anyone who has a phone. As I look back at my young life, I can't help but marvel at how the Lord has been so good to me, so good to people around me. He uses bad circumstances and brings good out of it. It's incredible. I have to confess, I give thanks to the Lord, for He is so good. His faithful love endures forever. I'm excited about Parable Ministries. It has quickly become my passion. It's incredible how a timid kid with a speech impediment spearheaded the development of a Bible teaching ministry. It is the humor of God to work with those who are weak so that He can demonstrate His strength. If Pickled Parables or My Dusty Bible has been a benefit for you, then praise the Lord. I am so glad that we have been able to minister to you in this way. I'm really excited for the future. As I already mentioned, we have plans to develop more podcasts as a free resource for those of you interested in knowing more about the Bible. and we'll announce those as they become available. But if you'd like to stay up to date with what we're doing, we're starting a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for. Just simply send an email to me. My name is Jesse, spelled Jesse, so it's Jesse at parableministries.com, and just say you'd like to sign up for the newsletter. And we'll put that info in the show notes for your convenience as well. If you'd like to get involved with what we're doing with Parable Ministries, there are 3 things that you can do. The easiest thing you can do is to simply rate our podcasts. If you enjoy our shows, let us know. And if you don't enjoy our shows, then still let us know. Tell us what we could do better. Something else that you can do is share this ministry with a friend. Tell them about Parable Ministries and what you appreciate about our shows. And finally, if you really want to get involved, we are in need of financial partners. We are completely donor supported. I have fought to keep ads out of our podcast and website for a long time because I want this to be unhindered from anything that could distract from its main purpose. If you would like to give to our mission, visit our website at parableministries.com/donate and click on the Donate Now button. Any amount you may give is helpful. We would love it if you partnered with us by becoming a monthly supporter, giving $25 a month for at least 1 year. I thank you so much for your time. I hope Parable has been able to encourage you wherever you're at, and my wish is that it may continue to do so for many years to come. To God be the glory, and may He receive all honor and recognition for what He has done through this ministry. I'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to Pickled Parables. If you enjoyed this message, please rate us, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you're interested in more things like this, check out our secondary podcast called My Dusty Bible. To stay up to date with all things Parable, follow us on Instagram at parable_ministries and visit our website at parableministries.com. Parable is a volunteer organization, and we would deeply appreciate your prayers. Thank you for joining us today. We'll catch you later.